Have you ever wondered what would happen if you woke up one morning and the price of gold wasn't what you thought it was? Imagine turning on the news and hearing that gold, the same metal that's been sitting quietly in vaults and safes for decades, had just been revalued overnight to $20,000 an ounce. Would that mean the economy had collapsed? Or that the government had just flipped a hidden switch that changed everything we thought we knew about money? It sounds like a wild scenario, something out of a conspiracy theory or a financial thriller. But here's the truth. This plan to revalue gold isn't fiction. It's real. And it's quietly circulating inside the highest levels of financial policy. Some of the world's top macroeconomic minds, including names like Luke Gromen, have been warning that this could be the ultimate emergency button, the one move that could reset the entire financial system. And now, new documents suggest that this plan isn't just possible, it's already being prepared. And stay until the end to understand what's really happening. Leave a like and let's start. Let's think about why they would even consider something like this. The United States is drowning in debt, more than $37 trillion. That's a number so big that it barely means anything anymore. And every year, the government spends more than it earns. Interest payments are ballooning, taxes can't keep up, and investors are starting to question how long the US can go on borrowing forever. But gold doesn't lie. It's not a promise printed on paper, it's not a number on a digital screen. It's real, physical, unchanging wealth. So what if instead of trying to pay off the debt in dollars that keep losing value, the government could just reprice gold massively and use that as a way to rebalance its books? Here's how it could happen. It's actually simpler than most people think. Picture Uncle Sam standing in front of the market, holding up a sign that says, "I will pay $20,000 for 1 ounce of gold." That's it. That one statement changes everything. Because from that moment on, why would anyone sell their gold for less than that amount? The government would have effectively re-anchored the price of gold by decree. And the moment that happens, the entire balance sheet of the United States changes overnight. Right now, the US government officially holds around 260 million ounces of gold, mostly stored in places like Fort Knox. At current market prices, that gold is worth roughly $850 billion. But if gold were suddenly valued at $20,000 an ounce, that same pile would be worth over $5 trillion. Just like that, a simple accounting shift would turn hundreds of billions into trillions of new assets on the government's books. You might be wondering, where does the money come from? Isn't this just a trick? In a way, yes, it's accounting magic, but it's legal magic. Here's how. The Treasury would issue what are called gold certificates, pieces of paper that represent claims on that gold, and the Federal Reserve would buy them. The Fed would simply create the dollars out of thin air, the same way it has done for years when it buys government bonds. The Treasury gets $5 trillion in fresh cash. The Fed gets $5 trillion in gold-backed certificates on its balance sheet. On paper, it's a perfect trade. The Treasury's assets go up, the Fed's assets go up, and the national debt, it suddenly looks a lot smaller compared to the new asset base of the country. Instead of a debt to GDP ratio of 120%, it could fall closer to 70%, a level that economists consider sustainable. That's the word they like to use when they think the system can keep spinning without collapsing. But this is where the story turns darker, because nothing like this comes without a price. See, when they revalue gold, they don't just shift numbers around. They create a shockwave through the entire economy. Think about it. If the government suddenly injected $5 trillion new dollars into the system, that money doesn't just sit quietly. It moves, it flows, it ends up in the hands of banks, corporations, and eventually, consumers. People start spending, investors start speculating. Prices rise. In other words, inflation explodes. And once inflation takes off, interest rates follow. That's when the doom loop begins. Because higher interest rates make it more expensive for the government to borrow, which increases the debt burden again. So the Federal Reserve would have to step in once more. This time to keep interest rates artificially low. They might launch a new version of yield curve control, buying up as many government bonds as necessary to keep the 10-year Treasury yield from going above, say, 2.5%. But where does the Fed get the money to buy those bonds? From nowhere, they just print it. Now you can see the cycle. They revalue gold to strengthen the balance sheet. But in doing so, they unleash a wave of inflation. Then they print more money to fight that inflation, which only creates even more inflation later. It's a feedback loop, one that ends in currency destruction. Just a little break, I opened a free Telegram community where I teach how to earn money with YouTube and build channels like the one you're watching. If you want to understand how to do it, there's the link below, back to before. But here's the part most people miss. This isn't just theory. The mechanism for doing this already exists, written in official Federal Reserve documents. It's called the Gold Certificate Account. In Section 2-10 of the Federal Reserve's own accounting manual, it clearly states that the Secretary of the Treasury has the authority to issue gold certificates to the Federal Reserve to monetize gold held by the US Treasury. In plain English, that means they can legally turn gold into money whenever they want. No new laws, no Congress, no public debate. It's all already approved, so if the Fed and Treasury ever decide they need a quick reset, they could simply dust off that manual, sign the papers, and announce the revaluation to the world. Now ask yourself, why would they leak this information? Why would this discussion suddenly be surfacing now, in 2025? Because the system is reaching its limits. The interest on US debt alone is now approaching $1 trillion a year. That means that soon just paying the interest will cost more than funding the entire US military. And when a system gets that close to breaking, desperate measures start to sound reasonable. So, could they really revalue gold to $20,000 an ounce? Theoretically, yes. Legally, yes. And economically, they might feel they have no choice. Let's imagine what happens to ordinary people if that day ever comes. First, anyone holding gold would see their wealth multiply instantly. A person with just 5 ounces of gold, about the size of a deck of cards, would suddenly be sitting on $100,000. People who've been called paranoid for owning gold would suddenly look like geniuses. The gold bugs everyone mocked would become the new rich, like modern-day Scrooge McDucks swimming in coins instead of dollars. But for everyone else, life would get harder, much harder. The cost of everything would skyrocket, from groceries to gas to rent. Because when the price of gold goes up that high, it means the value of paper money has gone down that low. Every dollar in your wallet would buy less. Every paycheck would stretch thinner. Inflation wouldn't be 5 or 10%. It could be 50. And what happens when inflation hits those levels? Governments usually panic. They impose price controls. They blame corporations. They print more money to help people cope. And each of those moves just makes the problem worse. So while the gold revaluation might save the government on paper, it would devastate the average citizen. Your savings would shrink, your debt would rise, and your purchasing power would melt away. There's another consequence most people don't think about, the psychological one. A revaluation of gold would be an open admission that the system has failed, that the dollar, once called as good as gold, isn't good enough anymore. It would signal to the world that America had to return to something real because faith in its currency had vanished. That's why this plan, though real and documented, remains hidden from the public eye. It's the last resort, the emergency escape hatch that they never want to use unless the entire house is on fire. But here's the twist. In the past, whenever governments have devalued or revalued gold, it's always come right before major change. In 1933, Franklin Roosevelt revalued gold from $20 an ounce to $35. It was a massive overnight reset that helped the government inflate away debt from the Great Depression. In 1971, President Nixon cut the link between the dollar and gold entirely, triggering decades of inflation and the end of the Bretton Woods system. And now, half a century later, history might be about to rhyme once again. The same ingredients are here: debt, inflation, and a world losing faith in fiat money. Central banks around the globe are already preparing. In fact, they're buying gold at the fastest pace in modern history. Why? Because they know that if the US ever pulls the trigger on revaluation, gold will be the anchor that decides the new order. And here's something even more telling. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet, which once contained only government bonds and mortgage securities, still lists one special account at the top: the Gold Certificate Account. It's right there in their own official statements. A reminder that gold, though long ignored, has never actually left the system. It's been sitting quietly in the background, waiting for the day it would be called back into service. So when analysts say this plan was leaked, what they really mean is that the dots are finally connecting. The debt crisis, the inflation, the geopolitical tensions, the push for sound money. It all points toward the same conclusion. They're getting ready for a reset. Now, whether that reset involves $20,000 gold or some other dramatic move, the effect will be the same: a sudden, forced repricing of reality. Let's imagine how markets would react, but before that, I want to remind you that if you want to build a YouTube channel like this, I can help you in my free Telegram community with the link below. The moment such an announcement hits, gold would skyrocket within minutes. The dollar would plummet. Stocks might crash as investors flee into anything tangible. Real estate prices could explode at first, then collapse as interest rates rise. And cryptocurrencies? They might surge too, at least until governments crack down to control capital flow. Within days, global trade would seize up as nations scrambled to recalculate exchange rates. Foreign central banks holding US debt might dump treasuries, not wanting to be repaid in devalued dollars. Others might follow America's lead, pegging their currencies to new gold values to stabilize their economies. It would be chaos, controlled chaos if you believe they can control it. But here's the chilling question. What if this isn't just about fixing debt? What if it's about control? Because revaluing gold isn't only a financial maneuver, it's a political one. Whoever controls gold controls the reset. And by setting the new price, the government would effectively dictate how much every ounce of private gold is worth, and by extension how much private wealth exists. If they can set that price, they can tax it, regulate it, or even restrict it. That's the part no one talks about. If gold's price were to explode, how long before authorities started imposing new rules on ownership? For national stability. We've seen this before. In 1933, during the last revaluation, private ownership of gold was outright banned. Citizens were ordered to hand it over to the government in exchange for paper dollars. Dollars that were then immediately devalued. Could it happen again? History suggests yes. So when you hear whispers about this plan, don't just think about profits or price targets. Think about power. Think about what it means when the same institutions that printed trillions from nothing suddenly decide to base everything on something real again. That shift would be monumental. A once-in-a-century reset that redefines what money even is. And here's the final irony. The very move meant to save the system could be the one that ends it. Because once people see that value can be changed by decree, that gold can be worth 20,000 one day and 2,000 the next, the illusion of stability disappears. Trust collapses. And once trust is gone, no amount of gold, dollars, or digital tokens can bring it back. So what should you do? The point isn't to panic, it's to prepare. Understand what's happening behind the curtain. Recognize that when governments start whispering about gold, it means the system is weaker than it looks. Because they only turn to gold when everything else has failed. Maybe the revaluation won't happen this year or next. Maybe it'll stay a secret plan for now. But make no mistake, the fact that it exists at all tells you one thing. The era of endless money printing is coming to an end. And when that moment finally arrives, the world will wake up to a new price of gold and a new definition of wealth itself. So keep your eyes open, stay calm, and remember this. When governments panic, they always reach for the oldest asset in history. Not because they want to, but because they have to. And when that day comes, you'll know that the secret plan to revalue gold wasn't a rumour. It was a warning, like the warning flashing under this video to subscribe to this channel. Smash that subscribe and like button, let me know your thoughts in the comments. And I also want to remind you that if you want to build a YouTube channel like the one you're watching now and make money from it, I opened a free Telegram community with the link below. See you there or in the next video. Just a reminder, I'm not a financial advisor. This video is for educational purposes only, and any results depend on your own decisions and actions.